Well, hello traders and investors. I'm L.A. Little. This is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets, and we're doing it from a neoclassical perspective. What that means is we look at supply and demand of the charts, and we use that to make decisions about how to manage our portfolios. Teach you how to trade. We show you how to fish, how to feed yourself. We don't throw fish at you. It is a better way, folks. And I know when everything's going up, it doesn't seem to matter. You know, you throw a dart, it hits the board somewhere, right? And everything goes up. But that's always the case when things goes up. Everybody looks like a genius. It's when it goes down that you really need to have a good, strong sense about what you're doing, how to protect yourself, how to make money, and no matter what the market does. If you want to learn how, well, that's what we do. Come visit us here at TA Today. Take a look at what we do and how we do it. I would invite you to do so. You can see, you can read, you can see what's here. It's a full program. Let's take a look at what happened in these markets today. NDX was up slightly. It was almost flat. NDX was the only one that got some green going. The NASDAQ, the Russell, the broad composite, the Russell down 0.5%, and the S&P down as well. If we look at overseas, had slight gains. They closed in slightly green in Europe, probably going to turn red tonight. And if we look down here, gold, silver, flipped around. Maybe tried to sell them down again, still couldn't get them down. That's a difference than what we've seen, and those things look to be turning. I've mentioned that before, and I guess I'll mention it again. As far as the markets, let's take a look at the numbers here. We'll look at the S&P 500, the charts. What are they doing? So they go up today. They do an inside day, about the same volume. Inside days don't really tell you much. It is a doji. That, again, could be a potential turn. The thing that typically happens in these kinds of markets where nothing ever seems to go down is that as you continue to rise, right, as you make this nice big run, you'll get potential turns. Whether they work out or not, you have to watch. Well, this is another one. It's a doji. And I'll show you here in a minute why that might be a turn. NASDAQ Composite, also an inside day, didn't tell us anything. NDX does make a new high today. The top yesterday, 53.16. Today it closes 53.52.13. So in other words, you go over, back under, but you have almost the same volume. So it's kind of hard to know whether that's really going to tell you anything. The Russell, it's also an inside day. A little bit more width on it, right, compared to all the others, but the Russell has been tending to do that of late. The reason I said that we may be getting a turn is if you remember about a week ago, or actually it was just last week, when we looked at the S&P 500, looked at the indexes, all of them were showing over-unders. They weren't two bars, they were over-unders, which is a much weaker signal, but it gave the potential for a pullback. Then we went over and looked at the sectors, and when we got to the sectors, we didn't see it. They actually showed strength. And what happened the next day? Well, they tried to pull it back, but they pushed it right back up. Well, today, you're starting to get a little bit more evidence on some of the sectors. Here's the IBB starting to roll back over, but that's not the one that is most interesting. And here's the home builders. Test failure at the highs, less volume. The real estate, if we look at it, right, gets over, back under, a little bit less volume. Not a huge tail, but a little bit less volume. Look at the transport average, right? And now the transport's got up there. Today they're doing a full retest regen. That's actually a positive the way it closed. If it can hold that, that's a good thing. Look at the SOX. SOX gets over, back under, less volume. If we look at the basic materials, and as you can see here as I go over these things, most of these are going over, back under the previous day, less volume. This one's a test of this high one more time. Still can't hold it. That looks to try and push back down. If you look at the energy sector still pushing lower. Now, financials have been a hot spot. Financials get over, back under today as well, a little bit less volume. So as you get to feel here, what I'm saying is that almost all of these, and I'll give you one more, the XLV. Actually, the XLV was an inside day. But all of these are starting to show that kind of signal on the sectors. Now, I've told you many times, I'll tell you one more time, if you've watched this show or if you're new to this show, This maybe is important to understand. Stocks move sectors. Sectors move markets. And so typically what you see is the sectors get moved by the stocks, and the sectors move the indexes, right? And so what you have, and what I'm saying here, is you have all these sectors, right, showing some weakness potentially, which will show up over here in the indexes if in fact it takes place. So we'll see how that plays out. I wanted to highlight one particular stock, and this was a stock that a member had asked about. Says, oh, is this thing getting close? And I wanted to just kind of run through the analysis I do and how I do it. And the first thing I do on any stock is I put it into one of my watch lists. I pop it up so that I can see all the time frames. And so, you know, I've got across my charts here, I've got all the time frames showing up so that I can see them all. Plus I have the trading cube showing up. And so all of these things pop up, right, so that I can see what they are. So the first thing I do is I glance at the trading cube, and the reason for that is I want to see what the trend is, right? It's an easy way to find it. I don't have to, you know, dig around to find it. And I want to see what the MTTFs look like on that particular stock. And so in this case, right, I can see that it's bearish, and bullish on the long term. And in this case, it's 86.5 MTTF, which means that it's getting kind of extended on the bear side. And so that's what I look at, and then I glance at the sector to see what the sector is doing. And the sector actually is not looking bad, right? The IBB is trying to push higher. So that's the first thing. So then let me pull these back over. Then I go from the left to the right, and I have them lined up daily, weekly, monthly. And I say, okay, what does this look like on this time frame? So I already know it's bearish, right? So I already know the trend is this way. And I already know it's extended. And so what that means is that at some point it's going to break a swing point high and change. And it had a swing point high right here, and it almost broke it, but not quite. So that's the first thing. Now, when I look at this, this is a bearish retest regenerate. It came right up to that area after more than 6 bars, and it failed. And that means it's going to try to regenerate lower. And if I look down here, I can see this high volume bar actually has a lower low. That's a magnet if we get back inside this bar. And so you have to expect that could get tested. So that's all the stuff that you see on this time frame. So right now, there's nothing here to tell you to buy this. If you go to the weekly and you look at the weekly, what is the weekly doing? Well, of course, it too is bearish, which we already know. And so that's the bearish there. You kind of got this trend going down, which is what you just saw on the daily. What is this one doing? Well, it just broke a whole bunch of swing point lows, but it came back within 6 bars. So usually when you do that, you're going to try to get up higher. Now, because the daily expected, you know, the high probability there was for the daily to actually trade lower again, this one didn't get as high as you would expect. It may still get there though, and the key here is the same thing we just saw over there, and that is that you got that high volume, right? It doesn't look as high on this chart because you've had other bigger days, but that's also there. So again, I don't see anything on this time frame telling me to buy it. And finally, if I walk over to the monthly, you know, the monthly still hasn't broken a swing point low. That's why it's still bearish. But you can see that it's kind of drifting down here and potentially is going to try and do that. And so on this particular time frame, you've got 2 swing point lows down here. If you were to break these, right, this would be a very negative chart. And so the risk is that this thing could just continue down. And so when I see all that kind of stuff, right, that makes me not want to do anything right here. If anything, if I really like this stock from a fundamental perspective, I would want to make it prove itself. How does it prove itself? Well, what it's got to do is it's got to come test this and fail to get lower. I need evidence that the sellers are unwilling to sell at lower and lower prices, come down, test that, fail on lighter volume, and start to bounce. And see some volume come into it on the bounce would be the ideal case. That would give you some sense that this is going to go up. It's going to test this bearish retest, regenerate one more time, and potentially get over it. Top of this is 2472, and if we pull the weekly back over and we look at that one's 2564. And so what I'm looking at here, just so that you can see, is I want to know where the top of this bearish retest regenerate is, 2564. 2564, again, go back to the daily. Where is that? It's up in this area here. Now, when I have these charts all spread to the side here, it's pretty easy to flip through these and see all of it. 2564 would get you over this big breakdown bar. You know, to me, the best you could get probably is about 2564 on the first bounce. You may get into, and here's where your real problem is going to be, is this bar, 2650. And so got a lot of work to do. So when I see a stock like this, you know, I don't see an entry. I don't see a reason to even try to get an entry. The first thing it's got to do is test, prove that sellers are unwilling to sell at lower and lower prices. And then you could take a little small thing if the volume starts to come in and it starts to push back up, with the idea that you're getting an entry position, and that if it comes up here and it actually gets past this bearish retest regenerate, right, then something might be cooking. And then next time it retraces, which it will, given that it's got all this overhead resistance, then you might get a second entry. Folks, anybody that bought anything back here, they're all in losing positions. As they come up, what are they going to do? Those people want out. They want out for even or a small loss. That's the people that are selling there. Let it come down and prove that they're not going to sell at lower and lower prices. As they come back, you've already eaten some of that supply up, right? You'll have a better chance to try and get a little bit higher next time, if this thing really is turning. That's how I analyze a trade when I'm trying to bottom fish, so to speak. You know, eventually they will turn, but they take a while, and this one will do the same thing. That's it for tonight. Look for a little pullback tomorrow. Have a great one. See you later. Good night.